What's up, everyone? We're live with Joe Ball from Joe Ball's Blue Tongues, and we'll be joined shortly by Dave Levinson. How are you doing tonight, Joe?
Yeah, I'm pretty good, mate.
Well, I
Pretty
guess
good.
it's the day there.
Yeah, it is. We haven't even left winter yet. There's a few days left of winter, and today it's said to top out at 34 degrees Celsius. So, mate, that's summertime temperatures. Way, way too soon, And for my comfort, anyway.
So, how quick does it go from like summer to winter there in Australia?
From summer to winter. Oh, look, there's a couple of months transitional period, but you get those spikes like you do in every country. It's like here now we've got a heat wave, but I see next week it's back to sort of temperatures that are more sort of typical of the time of year. And then that's the same in summer too. You can get a cold snap and then it heats right up again. But the general transition, um, given that there's a few spikes, takes about a couple of months.
Okay. So, you you just finished up your pairings. What ways did you plan for the pied side and like the patchwork?
Um, yeah, okay. So the pairings, I started my pairings what mid-July, and I got them finished by, yeah. This is the syncoides morph stuff by mid-August. So they've been finished about sort of 10 days now, and yeah, and just as you said, the main focus for me this year is combination stuff with patchwork and whiteside. So and yeah, and the pied side piece being the combination of patchwork and whiteside, and all the different overlay mutations which can go on top of that. So we're going to be hopefully looking at hyper patchwork, hyper whiteside, hyper pied side, then all three of those in albino, all three of those in patternless as well. So, and then you've got Annery in the mix, T plus. So it's a pretty exciting year this year for sure.
Do you have a favorite of like the pied side and the patchwork, or it's still kind of early on?
It's early on, and I guess for the viewers, it's probably a good chance to maybe give a bit of an explanation as to the difference between those three. In that um, patchwork and whiteside are two standalone mutations, both being essentially recessive. Some of the hets do have markers, but um, essentially they work in a recessive manner. Um, and then the is that you putting that up there? Yeah.
Yep.
Um, yeah, yeah, cool. And then the pied side is a combination of the two, and that is where this all gets interesting, really, because um, how it kicked off is, when I produced the first couple of white sides, I noticed that they seem to me anyway to be an extreme, albeit a very extreme version of the patchwork. They both had the pink tongue. They both have white patches throughout, and yeah, the patchwork was just a very, very toned down version of it. So I thought for me, the best thing to kick this off with was to see if there's any compatibility between those two mutations. And how I did that was by putting a het patchwork over a het white side, and lo and behold, they turned out to be allelic mutations, which I think you guys have a bit more experience of than us with sort of the um, ball pythons. You've got the cryptic and krypton ball pythons, which do the same thing. So that means that when you pair them together, you get a visual animal straight off the bat without having the um, het stage or F1 stage or whatever you want to call it. So, and what that ended up looking like was typically a midpoint animal between the two. So you'd literally got, if you like, your white side being, if you were to look at it as a volume control, um, being mutated at an 8, 9 out of 10 level, and your patchwork being mutated at a 1, 2 out of 10 level, you ended up with a visual animal that was scoring at sort of a 5, 6 on that and having sort of the midpoint appearance of both. And I tried to give that a name which sort of brought both of those mutations in together. So, you had a pied appearance, but also had the white side appearance. So, so hence the term pied side. So, when you see that written, it's not a standalone mutation. It is the allelic combination of patchwork and white side, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Being the first allelic one, then, has that caused a bit of confusion?
Yeah, I mean, it did for me. I'd never worked with anything like that before, and my understanding of genetics is all applied. I've learned it all as I've done stuff. I've learned all about this. Yeah, I had did a little bit of biology at school, but never really paid much attention. But my understanding of reptile mutations came from hands-on breeding them myself and learning. I learned what incomplete dominant and recessive and all those things were early on, but I'd never seen this. So once I saw it, it was back into looking at some precedents and basically hopping stateside to see what you guys had with ball pythons and so on, to learn how that works. And yeah, for sure, it's caused a bit of confusion amongst the guys here too. But I think there's quite a few people that are abreast of it now and the opportunities that it presents,
Well, then on top of that, you produce this one that kind of looks more like the pied and the ball pythons.
Yeah, well, the top one there is a T plus white side, so that's a white side. The first, if you like, double visual from the white side. So that's our T plus, if that's what you want to call it. It's a bit of conjecture as to whether it's a T plus or not. Doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, it's a recessive mutation, and that top one is that T plus white side, and I've called that a violet white side because the color of the tongue takes on a more violet color, as well as the back, sort of a huey purple kind of thing. So yeah, that's that one, and then the one below, I don't know what that is. That's another pied phenotype that's come about. I mean, there's maybe 5 different types of pied now in Australia, all with slightly different origins and different methods of production. And that one just popped out from a line of animals that have been breeding for a while, which leads me to believe that, unfortunately, it's probably some kind of chimera and unreproducible, because I've sort of bred that line out quite a bit, but time will tell. But yeah, it takes on the appearance, like you said, Alex, of the classic pied in ball pythons. Be awesome if it can be replicated.
Yeah, even if not a true genetic, if you could find a way to replicate it, whether polygenic, it's still beautiful.
Yeah, it'd be nice if the same line just pops out the old one more. So, I can grab that animal now if you like. That's the way you want to do it. If you don't mind my ugly mug disappearing for a couple of secs, I can grab any animal you like.
How are you doing, Dave?
I'm good. How's the sound?
Good.
That's what I wanted to hear. You went right into the pie cider project, man. You didn't even wait 3 minutes.
Here she is. She's actually just about to shed any day, which she's just past that real slough stage, which ruins the appearance of the animal. But she's just that sort of day or two short of shedding, where you start to see what she actually looks like again. She's a little bit opaque, but you get the idea there. You can see those big patches of white ripped into the side of it there on both sides. Seems to be getting more and more as the animal's maturing. So yeah, there she is.
And you said that popped out of a line you've been working with. Did that have any recessive mutations already in the mix of that line?
Yeah, that's a visual T plus in itself, but it had a Mercury mother, so it makes it also het white, het hyper, and het anery. So I'd been breeding those animals for a while, so I thought that that's probably not possible from that line. So, which leads me to think it's some kind of strange chimera fusion, and hence possibly not reproducible. But time will tell. Fantastic anyway in its own right.
Is that a female by chance?
Yeah, it is a female.
Has there ever been any parthenogenics in blue tongue skinks in Australia? A female reproducing herself?
No, not that I know of. I mean, there's been a couple of instances of retained sperm, i.e., people that haven't mated an animal 1 year and then not mated it the next, and then it's had babies. But that's as close to that as I'm aware of.
Okay, that's curious.
Just pop this lady back.
Yeah.
There was a question you had about those, wasn't there, Dave?
Maybe. I don't know. So essentially, by putting those two genes together that you said were allelic, it kind of gives you a perfect balance of both the mutations.
Yeah, it really does, and it opens up. Instead of just going right, you can make patchwork combos and white side combos. You can now make pied side combos, and then your natural variation means that, look, there's going to be about another 30, 40 different subtle phenotypes across all that stuff. So, and like you say, a balance between the two and all the extreme variations of each of them. So it's kind of transformed Australian blue tongue genetics from sort of having a race that wasn't already run, but we'd seen a lot of the combos and visual animals already, you know, and it was sort of, where's it going from here? And then those two, patchwork popped up, then white side popped up, then the allelic popped up, and it's like, whoa, hang on a minute, we're going to, you know, slow down because it's going to go nuts, you know?
Oh, go ahead.
With the variation, is it hard to tell sometimes which gene it is?
No, it's very clear, and I've produced a litter with all three in. It's very clear to see what a patchwork is, what a pied side is, and what a white side is. But yes, absolutely, there is, and there was one that I've seen that you know that looked that you weren't sure whether it was pied side or patchwork, but you're going to get that when it merges like that. You're going to get individual animals, and the evidence so far suggests it's only individuals. It's not a mass grey area. You know what I mean? I can get a patchwork out now to show you the difference between you'll be amazed at how subtle the patchwork is versus the pied side. I'll just grab one.
Yeah, that will show a good variation. I checked. I didn't have a picture ready of that one. I'm curious to see what patternless does to that, if it's going to wipe everything away.
Yeah, you and me both, because you've also got het patternless, which has a phenotype difference too. So you can add that to the mix. Okay, so there is there's the first patchwork, and you can see it's got the pink tongue and only the tiniest bit of white on the snout there. Where am I going? Let me get that in the middle. That's better. Yeah, and then if you can zoom in on the toes, on my little pinky finger there, you can see it just got white toes there, and the belly's devoid of pattern, and the pattern only starts sort of further around the animal, not dissimilar to a white side, but less less obvious. And then you've got the pied side here, which, as you can see, even less pattern on the back.
Might hit some on his phone, maybe there.
Maybe. How long do you think it'll be until we figure? I will say, like, both those genes by themselves are really so low expression. It's kind of perfect the way the allelic form turned out for it. I really like the white head on it. I like those high white sides. Kind of into that.
Well, and it gives you something for everyone. You know, someone might like the more muted side versus the extreme.
Yeah.
I wonder if I should kick him and have him
Mhm.
come back.
Yeah, maybe kick him, message him. See if he wants to pop back in. That might be the easiest way. I'm not the tech guy.
So, how's your season been going, Dave?
I started pairing bows the other day. Last couple of years, I've waited a little too long. I put the ultrasound on some, and a lot of them are progressing already. So I probably about 10 pairs I put together yesterday. I saw some courtship pretty quick. Ball pythons are really getting packed with food right now. That season's going to kick back up in October. And everything else, the colubrids, the skinks, and all the other Australian species are just being fed up right now. And I'll be cooling stuff down probably in about a month and a half. What about you, man? Are you already in cool down, or when are you cooling down?
I might do a little later this year. Normally, like beginning of October. But some of it depends. We'll get some cold spikes, and like half of the adults will just go down. You know.
Yeah. When I was down in Florida talking to like Tiki and Heather some more, they're getting these litters down there like so late in the year. And I've been putting some consideration to maybe set up a couple groups during cooling this year in like a 6-foot enclosure, maybe like a 1.2. And I'm kind of curious what that group will do together. If maybe they cycle when it's time for them to cycle. I told you I was struggling to get the female albino to cycle properly, and I think it's because her season's just much later than everybody else's.
There we go. Back again, guys. Is that better?
Have you noticed pure Easterns have a later season, Joe?
Yeah. Well, like I was saying to you before we went live, it depends. Depends where you've got them. If they're outside, for sure. They can be manipulated to be in line with northerns, but what I would notice with them is they need a bit more of a harder cooling, whereas your northerns will generally mate with a minimal disruption of weather pattern, if you get what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you start hybridizing the mutations with the northerns and easterns, where does that put them on their season? Does it go closer to your northern season or your eastern seasons?
Just somewhere in between, mate. Yeah. For me, it changes the game in a positive angle because it makes them all much easier to breed. And you tend to get the benefits of both subspecies in there.
Oh no, of course we've talked about that a bunch in the past.
I've still got those in hand if you want. But yeah, what you can see on the pied side is there's a lot more pied patches on the face. See how the face is very white?
Yeah.
A lot more pattern stripped out. That one's almost got letters on its back like XOXO. And I was thinking, you could play around with that over time. And that's a good example because there's northern in the mix here, which gives different patterns on the back. And yeah. So yeah, that's the pied side and the patchwork.
So you might know about this I love comeback. So with allelic projects, we had big allelic projects in boa constrictors and recessives. And like one thing that we found out, so we had a T negative project that when you bred it to a T positive, it made it made a T positive, but a lighter version. They just happened to be allelic.
Yeah, there's examples of that. There was one that I remember, R.I.P. Brian posted a few years ago with milk snakes, and that was the same, wasn't it?
I don't know if it was the Sinaloans, but yeah, when you bred the T positive, the T negative, you ended up getting T negatives and T positives in the litter.
But the same thing, yeah, exactly the same. It's just straightforward as that, really, but with these,
No, but one cool thing you'll see in the breeding though is if you do a what do they call them? The double visual. What do you guys call them? The double visual, the two?
What do we call them?
Yeah, the double visual you get in the allelic form.
It's the pied side on that.
Okay, so the name's pied side, then you have the patchwork. The reason I bring it up is if you take two visuals and put them together, like let's say you make the allelic form of both together, you breed them together, a third of the litter comes out of each one of the genes every single time.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I've done that, and that's what you happen. If you put two pied sides together, you can then break up the break it back up again. So in the litter, you'll get patchworks, white sides, and pied sides. You know. Yeah. And that's true proof that it is an allelic mutation at the end of the day, and that it wasn't just a subspecies thing that's changing the appearance. You know, you have to be able to break the mutation back up again, otherwise it's something else going on.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's really cool, man. And like I said, I love the two working together. Honestly, I like that really high expression animal with the white head.
Yeah. I can grab one of those white sides for you. I've just got one on hand here.
Have you seen any other pattern ones like that?
So yeah, that's the white side, and that that was named in parallel with sort of a US precedent as well. You've got your rat snakes over there, which show exactly the same phenotype as that. I also think the gators are a white side. You know, your pied gators. It's the same mutation as that, and the leopard geckos, incidentally too. They call them pied, but you know it's not really a classic pied. They've all got that vertebral uniformity and the white sides. So yeah.
They have that in corn snakes also. There's the pied-sided red project, or the blood red pied-sided boa constrictors.
That's where I saw the name pied side. So that you know, when I was thinking of a name to call the allelic combination between patchwork and white side, I saw that blood red pied side thing and thought, you know what, I'm lifting that.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one.
Yeah.
Oh, and definitely a good name helps the project.
Yeah, that's key. On that, it's key. I think when there's a lot of mutations like this, it's key to name the stuff that's totally different. But I think when you start naming stuff that doesn't really look any different to the other, I think you start, for want of a better expression, start crawling up your backside with too many names. You know, some of the combos that I've made, for instance, with albinism, they're all different shades of white. And it's like, okay, you all want to name 3 or 4 different things, but at the end of the day, let's just stick to the genetic name, because once the phenotypes are all the same, if one's called vanilla and one's called iced tea and one's called this and one's called that, it's like, really? Do you actually want new people in the game, or do you just want to confuse them, you know?
So with that, what's your opinion on like albinos in the United States now? With Heather having success, I know they're going to put black lions into it. They're going to breed red blue-tongued skinks into it. Now, when we start seeing these different color phases in the albinos, I think a lot of breeders are going to start putting nicknames on those lines. Do you think that's appropriate?
Look, it always happens. I mean, I was just saying that it was,
yeah,
if you like, a bit of a frustration over the years to see that's done. But then everybody, in fairness, everybody does their own body of work, and everybody wants to name something, right? So it is what it is, David. At the end of the day, I was talking in an ideal world, it'd be nice if we could all stick to one name, but everybody having their own say on things and create their own little variation. Everybody wants a new name. So if you're really into it, you've just got to roll with the complexity and the personalities within the game and embrace everything, haven't you?
Yeah, you know, every community works so differently. Like, you know, I do a lot of boa constrictors, and like in my T-positive form of boa, there's pastel lines like flamingo bred into it, red rum bred into it, RC pastel. And it does completely change the overall appearance of the animal when it comes to the amount of color showing through. So, you know, different communities, you know, function a little differently, I guess.
Yeah, and there is that too. As a breeder, you can also see the difference between all those lighter shades. And you know that there is a phenotype and genotype difference there. But when you take a photo and put it online, you get people say, well, what's the difference between that and that, when the kind of isn't in the photo, you know? So again, it's a challenging one, but certainly back to Alex's original point, when you've got the the really standout combinations or standout mutations, when they've got a really good name to them, they're the things that really put the bums on seats in the hobby. When you think of your hypermelanistic bluey, your white side, your lava, for instance, that's the stuff that people chase. A lot of those other things you're getting down to nerd level. I think that's right, David, in saying with some of the other stuff. And I embrace all that too, but you definitely need 4 or 5 really cool flagship mutations, which everybody's calling the same thing. Otherwise, it can be counterproductive.
No, I understand that. I think with us with the albinos, it's our lack of mutations we have. It'll be more line breeding to change them here, just because we only have a few recessive projects in the United States.
Oh, I think you're doing pretty well. You've got the toffee, haven't you, which looks similar to our patternless, albeit you guys have had that mutation over there a lot longer, because I think it came out of Indonesian blueies many years ago. I remember seeing those before there was a patternless even being talked about here. So you've got that opportunity to go into your albino. You've got the bubblegum, which I saw, which I believe is the same as our T+, albeit in a again an Indonesian subspecies, which gives it a slightly different phenotype. So you've got those 3 to mix in. You've got some hypers over there, so you can make your own lavas. I think you've got plenty to go at versus a few years ago, anyway.
Yeah, it's different now. Go ahead, Alex. I'm sorry.
It's made that quantum leap. It's needed somebody, and it's been seems at this point that it's Heather and Ron that have managed to truly nail down the replication of some of that stuff, and they seem to be on the right latitude to be able to do that, which is fortunately my case as well. And that means that everybody's going to be able to get to have a crack at it over time.
Yeah, very true.
So have you worked much polygenics into your mutations, really? Or since you have so many, you haven't played with it much?
Oh, look, the polygenics comes in naturally. Because once you start mixing mutations, you're also mixing subspecies. You're mixing, and there's northern and eastern. But within the range of easterns, there's probably, there's dozens of different localities. And with the northerns, there's 3 or 4 different phenotypes, let alone, in a couple of different localities with the Kimberley and so on. So there's lots of different phenotypes that pop up from that on top of the mutations going in, which present further opportunities for line breeding. I have focused on a couple of things that I think are key, but there's so many more to chase with what that presents. For instance, I noticed that when you put the northern into the lavas, it made them a little bit more yellow, whereas if you keep a higher eastern percentage in there, you can strengthen the oranges and so on. So just little things like that are mindful when you're breeding, that to take on the examples and follow a line breeding sort of avenue.
That might change some with us, though, you would think, based on like the color of the northerns we got, since we got, red ones, yellow ones, solid black, and
oh mate, you're going to make a whole new range of different colored blues too, because of what you've just said, the line breeding that you've already done with intermedia, and the fact that the bubblegum brings in Indonesian blood, and dare I say, without sounding controversial, it's probably a bit of Indo blood in a lot of your stuff anyway. Hard to say that whether there is or there isn't. So, and there definitely isn't any Indo blood in any of our stuff, and that that's going to lend itself to a whole heap of different different looks, and great in my opinion.
Yeah. No, I'll say this. I think the tension in the United States within the community has changed a lot. I don't think there's much tiptoeing as there was in the past. I think there's an understanding in some parts of the community that there'll be the purists, and then I think there's going to be other parts that are just going to kind of change things up, do crosses. But I think mainly because of the mutation end of things.
Well, once you start breeding mutations, you can't really do both. I mean, yes, you could keep one single mutation pure, but even when you're putting two mutations from the same subspecies over one another, like I just alluded to before, you can get eastern blue tongues from the far northern tip of Australia right down to South Victoria. They're a totally different lizard, but they've got the same subspecies name. And you know, some people will try and tell you, oh, it's pure eastern, but at the end of the day, there's interspecific hybridization too, which a lot of people don't understand. There's just because it's got the same scientific name. If you're hybridizing extreme localities, it's still interspecific hybridization.
Yeah, no, and I agree with that completely. You know, in my opinion, you know, considering that any mutations we get in blue tongues, like the bubblegum, for example, is probably going to be something out of Irian. With that being said, I do believe that there will be crossing with more IJ stuff into whatever northern or eastern stuff we have here mutation-wise, because that's the only way we'll truly get new mutations and moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely, and it does strengthen the gene pool, mate. You know, you are then entering a pet market, and your audience is not somebody that necessarily understands all the different subspecies of blue tongues and localities and countries that they come from and this and that and the other. They just literally step on the internet and they want that perfect albino, but they want it nice and healthy, nice and big, you know, zero problems. And by the time you've got some of those other localities and subspecies in there, that's what you're going to get, and that's what they want. So that's how it works.
The community is so big, and you know, I always say there's something for everybody. And even in our boa community in the United States, we have purists that want to just put Dorfos or Dorf boas. We have some guys that want to cross mutations. We have guys that have like Suriname boas that don't want albinos, don't want stripes, don't want mutations. They just want Udo line stuff or these not rare lines, but lines of these animals. So I guess my whole thing is the industry is big enough for everybody. There will be people going the direction of mutations. The purists will always still be here because every community still has their purists.
Yeah, that's right, and that's the same here, mate. You get a splitting community. You know, you get those true Herpa style people that love all the locality stuff, and then you get the extreme morph breeders. You know, and then you get some people that like the lot. So, like you say, plenty of space for everybody.
Space for everybody.
Yeah.
Go ahead, bud.
Now, Dave mentioned for us, like a lot of mutations are going to come from Indo. What about like the ones there? Are a lot of those from other keepers, or do some pop up? You know, you pair two random northerns together and bam, you get a white side, or?
Oh, look, all the mutations have come from different, you know, generally wild caught stuff. Yeah, so you know the albino, the hyper, the white side all came from easterns, New South Wales easterns at that. The Annery came from some Kimberley blue tongues. I was fortunate enough to fluke that one, to be honest. And then your T plus comes from Darwin Northerns. So yeah, and there's examples of each. There's examples of hobbyists popping them out, and then there's examples of founder animals being found in the wild and then put into captive breeding programs. So, if that answers your question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So most likely, then let me rephrase the question. As we somewhat inbreed like northerns and stuff, you have a higher chance of popping out new mutations. You think that's possible?
I don't know. There's a few people that have these theories on inbreeding lines to an nth degree, and then suddenly genes start to mutate and all that. I don't know. I've never really climbed inside a lizard to see how it works. So
Okay.
I don't know. Everything I've seen has usually been stuff that's obviously already there. But then that lizard that I showed you before, you know, that standard pied looking thing, that's come out of a line that's been inbred for a while. So yeah, I guess I can't really answer that one.
I think the argument that I've read on that, and I think it was like a 6th generation argument, is, when you have an isolated group of animals being bred, if a gene pops up, there's going to be a high percentage chance that it crosses another one of those animals at a point. Let's say if it's a het or hereditary for an albino. So you could have a het albino in your collection for 20 years and not realize it until eventually maybe you breed stock back. So same thing in the wild. You have a small group of animals that are inbreeding constantly. If there's a mutation somewhere floating, there's a higher percentage chance of them overlapping and hitting. So I think that's kind of what the argument is.
That's how I understand it, is that it was there already, and you're going to find it. And those people that, and that leads back to something that I've quoted to a lot of people, in that you find in Australia, the people that have actually popped mutations out are generally the people that have worked with a species for some time. They haven't just bought a group of animals and flipped all the progeny. They've actually held back stuff, done a little line breeding, and then found that there was something in there. Like you say, they had a het in a group of 6 animals. It's not until you put some of the progeny back together or outbreed to something else that it will come out. That would be how I would understand it. But some people seem to have this idea that there's, inbreeding to X amount of generations and you can get a spontaneous mutation. Well, yeah, I'm not so sure about that. And I wouldn't know.
I got an argument on that one. Crested geckos in the United States. When we initially started, I was under the impression we had about 450 animals come out of New Caledonia. Those animals had been bred in the United States for almost 30 years with no mutations being pulled out of the wild. That community now has a viable leucistic. It's got that co-dominant project, the lily whites. You got the cappuccinos. There's a sable project, which is like a melanistic looking animal. And I want to say there's 1 or 2 other mutations that have popped up since that are true mutations, recessive or codom. I say that wrong still. So again, we had an isolated group of animals that we bred for 30 years, and now all of a sudden we have 6 mutations to look at in that community.
Yeah, wow. Yeah.
So
I guess it's hard to be 100% whether it's a floating het that no one knows or if it's, spontaneous you ran.
Yeah, I think that summarizes it pretty well, Alex, to be honest. Generally speaking, you'd think it's a floating het. I like that terminology. But yeah, if there's some internal magic going on at some point, yeah, like I said earlier, I haven't climbed inside a lizard to see.
I think it's Ozzy had the high intensity orange stream in ball pythons, and he kind of worded it like that, where it's sporadic happens. So I wasn't sure if it's possible in other stuff or.
Yeah.
Mutations are confusing, and they kind of do whatever they're going to do.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Just to jump around a little bit, what was it like in Australia during the pandemic when it came to reptile sales?
Oh, everything went through the roof. I mean, those of you who know a little bit about me and my wife know that she's got a crazy interest in animals just as I have, but albeit on a slightly different plane. She's interested in dogs and birds and so on. So we breed dogs, birds, and reptiles. And for a short period there, once the pandemic hit and everybody was locked in their houses, it went through the roof. Everybody thought, I know what we'll do. We'll run around and buy a load of pets because we can do that at home. But then I think there was a fallout from that. And I think we're still suffering from it to a degree. I think the pet game here has gone backwards in the last couple of years in regards to price and demand. Partly as a result of that, and secondly, because of economic reasons, I guess.
Yeah, we're a mirror image of you, buddy. The exact same thing happened here, and there's a lot of people here that are acting like the sky's falling and it's all over. There's some people that jokingly call it the end of the industry in the United States with certain reptile species. But we had the same surge you did. Prices went up on everything. Demand went way up. And then, honestly, I think with all the new breeders in the community, we didn't get anybody new after that. And there was more breeders, so the money got a little more spread out, I guess you could say.
Yeah, that's right. basically sucked all the money out from 2 years ahead, didn't it? You know,
Yeah.
and then when the 2 years ahead later came, well, there wasn't anybody there to buy them.
So,
So,
2 great years,
do you
though,
want
man.
to?
Those were unbelievable years.
What's that?
I said those were 2 amazing years, though, when it came to reptile sales.
Yeah, they were. They were. Yeah.
Have you noticed a bit of people getting out of the hobby now?
I think a general observation I found, and I think blue tongues are a little exempt from this. I think, um, on the whole, I think the whole idea of keeping large numbers of animals as a cool thing to do has changed globally, or at least within the countries that have a history of doing it. You know, so I think there's a bit of a woke lefty edge to it, in that animal hoarding and whatever is not necessarily what you should be doing. You know, and I think as a result, a lot of the younger generation are not as in line with keeping lots of animals.
They're still keeping them though, but they are like switching to bigger and
Okay,
better.
kind of like a animal activist.
Yeah, there's a little bit more of that kind of awareness, if that's what you want to call it. Me being a bit of a Gen X guy, I tend to belittle some of that approach, but I guess it has its own benefits.
But do you think you'll lose a generation, as in your next generation doesn't seem to be excited about your generation when it comes to breeding animals or working with animals?
Say again, sorry, I was just reading a question on here as well.
Oh, no, I did the same thing. All I was saying was, does it seem like the next generation of breeders isn't excited like your generation was? Do you think there's going to be maybe...
I think because we were a bit more, our generation's a bit more exploratory, isn't it? And we've had fun exploring it all. And I think the next generation has a little less sort of to explore. And I think as a result, it's on a plate for them. And then as a result, I think the interest level isn't quite maybe what it was for us.
Interesting. We haven't really had... Yeah, we haven't had conversations like that here. I mean, of course, we have political conversation in the United States, but there hasn't really been activism against working with animals any more than there ever has been in the past.
Yeah. Maybe that's the case. Maybe I'm just a little bit more aware of it now, but yeah.
Never know.
Who knows?
You want to answer John's question?
What's that? Yeah,
you want to
I'll get
John?
that question. John says, what's your hardest project to prove out? To be honest, I've never really had that much trouble proving projects out. I've got like I said before, I live on a decent latitude. I don't find breeding blue tongues to be particularly difficult at all with on the latitude that I have and the methods that I have. But there has been a project that I found was difficult to get right, and I guess that was the larvas, because they were two pure eastern mutations, and I think the hypers and the albinos all came from the same outbred. The Snake Ranch who produced them, I think, used the same animals to prove both out. So they were related before they even started. So when those two were put together, that initial double genetic larva project was a bit challenging because it was a little bit inbred, if you like, and needed some outbreeding to the point where now you're starting to see some really, really good, strong larvas, but it took a few years to get there.
Interesting.
Now, what about your favorite looking proven project?
Oh, look, for me, my favorite stuff, dare I say, isn't. I love my blueies, but it's in other skinks. I love sort of the more colony skinks. I love my T plus or caramel albino Cunningham skinks, and I love the T negative albino tree skinks. I also have a bit of always have had, albeit limited opportunity within them, a love for pink tongues, and I guess also the blotchies. So yeah, you said what's my favourite? It's all of them really, but yeah, if you were to push me, I think it's the opportunity in the Cunningham skinks, which is my favourite right now.
Very cool.
I've
What,
got a couple of those in hand here actually. I managed to catch a couple out earlier.
What makes them your favorite? Just the communal aspect?
Yeah, I mean, what I love about that kind of stuff is so here you've got a wild type. Well, it's a het, but it's a wild type in appearance, and as you can see, love to give you a good chomp. Yeah, I love the opportunity of communal keeping that they present. I've got some big outdoor aviaries here, and you can run sort of half a dozen in there in a nice big rock pile, you know. Let me see if I can get and they display themselves really well. When you go out to look at them, you see them on top basking in groups, you know. So yeah, there's your wild type, and there's your what is a caramel albino, which I got that name from, again, stateside. The Barkers described a ball python as a caramel albino, which isn't a classic red. Well, it does have red eyes, but it doesn't have those classic high, sharp red eyes like a teen egg alb, and it isn't flash white. It's sort of got a caramel color, but if you shine a light in the eyes, it's actually got what I would describe as a ruby red eye. So it's a classic T plus or caramel albino, and yeah, for me they really do it. And I love the spiny scales on them too. You know,
Yeah.
You've got sort of that prehistoric, and they're close to a monitor as well. You know, some of the skinks are kind of that midpoint between a bluey and a monitor, and I think these guys really nail that. Plus, they've got attitude, as you can see. I got to hold them. If I let go of these, they're gone. You know.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. So what's it like when a mutation is found in the wild in your country? Do you get the phone call normally? Like, how does that work when these things pop up?
Oh, look, that's the same. I mean, obviously, to pull stuff out the wild's illegal, so yeah, some of that stuff gets difficult to get your hands on, or impossible in most cases. But I generally do get phone calls from keepers when they pop stuff out of their own collections, for sure, you know, because I've got the track record of breeding blue tongues. On 2 or 3 occasions, I've had phone calls from keepers that said, hey, look what I've been fortunate enough to produce. And then offer it up, saying that, you know, I could probably do a better job, or you know, do you want to take it on? That albino Cunningham skink project's a classic for that. There was a guy that popped those out from some wild types down in New South Wales, and after talking to them, he offered me the chance to have a red hot crack at it if I came to the party on price, you know. And so yeah, that's kind of how I end up with those kind of things, because I'm often the first point of conversation from having a deep history of working with mutations.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that. We have certain guys in the country too, like BOA guys. They get the call from South America when there's something that's found, just like because they're so well known in the community. When you Google, it's the name that pops up. So I'm sure when people Google skinks in Australia, you get a lot about Joe Ball.
Yeah, and that's where I get lucky a little bit here and there, and but then I guess, as I say, you create your own luck, don't you? You know, I was messing around with these animals when there wasn't too many people interested in them. So, yeah, I mean, the interest levels now in Australia are sky high, but you know, that it makes sense because so many cool critters. But when I first started on it, it was, you know, yeah, there was an albino that had been found and all that kind of stuff, but there was nothing really that was mainstream yet. It was all just wild types, and everybody was still into loving snakes and the opportunities that they provided, as opposed to blue tongues, which had the perception of stinky lizards, really.
Interesting.
Now, on the Cunninghams, you picked up some of those like jet black ones. Are those kind of like the IMG, or are they like?
They're just the locality, and I don't know if that's a recessive thing or not. I'm not too sure. And the guys that have worked with them have literally just got pairs of them and have produced more of them, and they just end up a lot blacker than any other cunnies. So I don't really know if that's a proven recessive mutation or not, but I picked up some of those because I obviously wanted to mix it into that albino to try and create some variation, and time will tell. They weren't necessarily a great, a massive pickup like the albinos were. They're something that's fairly common. They were just a moderately cheap acquisition that I just see an opportunity with to change phenotype in the albinos.
Well, and plus, I think they just look striking as they are too.
Okay. Have you made?
Yeah, a lot of the Cunninghams are black anyway, so you're only changing them slightly. It's not like the blues where there's a heap of different colours through them.
Yeah. Have you made?
Go on.
Okay. Oh, have you double heads yet for the albinos of the dark?
No, I've only just picked up the dark ones.
Oh, have you bred the blacks for the carbon though?
No, I've just got some that are 6 months old. That's it. Yeah, and the work that I'd done with the Cunninghams was I got the original project, which was one albino and a few siblings, and I managed to score another albino out of that line by pairing them. So another sort of largely inbred individual, and then I used a really large wild type male from the same locality over the original albino to do an outbred line that was pure. So I created a bunch of hets to remake the albino in its purest form, and I've got sort of half a dozen of those on the ground now. So that's where it's at. It's been replicated in its purest form. Now it's time to look around and put some of the other variations through it to see how much fun we can have with it.
Okay. Inbreeding. So you're talking a lot about outbreeding these projects. Have you guys had a lot of run-ins to over inbreeding with the mutations where you start running into maybe underbites or deformities?
I think in a word, yes. I mean,
yeah.
There's quite a few mutation reptiles in Australia, and I've been fortunate enough to work with quite a few of them, whether it's albino tree skinks and the Cunninghams through to all the different python morphs, whether it's in Antaresia or carpets. And largely in carpets, the inbreeding, you get away with it. There seems to be a tough species, and some of those original albino Darwins have been inbred for years with no real visual impact, so to speak. But the blueies, I find, once you get past F1 and you start pairing F2s, you start encountering quite a few problems. And I think the game in Australia has been held back by that, by and large, inadvertently, here and there. Yeah.
Okay.
So, for instance, for those of you that are watching, if you were to put a mutation and outbreed it, and then you get the progeny and pair them together, you normally get away with that.
I guess you don't get away with that.
Might get away with that. I don't know. Do you think he touched the screen? What do you think? Bump him and bring him back in like last time?
Yeah.
I'm glad this isn't my fault this time.
Why did? Oop, that didn't do it. When he does get back, I was thinking about talking about blotches too before we forget.
Yeah, we get into some blotchy talk. I was gonna with the kind of
You're cutting in and out a little bit, unless that's me.
There again. Yeah, I'll pick up where I left off. So yeah, if when you've outbred a project, if you inbreed the progeny, that's fine for a generation. But then if you inbreed the progeny from there, they start tending to go backwards. So I think it's the responsibility of us breeders to be a bit smarter than that. For instance, with all the pied stuff there is now, I have taken on more of a concept where you do plenty of outbreeding, but you don't pair any siblings at all. You know, if you're going to do an outbreeding, you need to do an outbreeding to 2 or 3 different unrelated animals, and then pair cousins back together again to replicate the mutation. There is actually a term for that. I forget what it's called, but you need to have sort of like a family tree approach to it and be a little bit more broader in your perspective. Otherwise, you're going to end up with problems. And blueies don't seem to stand up to chronic inbreeding like snakes do. You know?
So cousins would be like roughly 25% related. Would you say don't do any more than that if you can?
I think so, yeah. But the problem lies, Alex, with keepers further down the track, you know. And this is by no means a shot at all, because the expectation of keepers with 5 or 6 animals is that they want to be able to pair what they buy. You know, they're not going to embark on massive outbreeding projects. You know, they're pet level keepers that are lower down in the pyramid, if you like. So it's the responsibility of us breeders to do a better job at the pointy end, to give more robust animals that are fit for purpose further down the chain.
Okay.
You know, and that's not just myself. You know, that's people that, you know, the people that there's plenty of breeders in Australia too that literally just buy animals and inbreed them and flip the progeny. You know, there needs to be a greater aspect of outbreeding.
Yeah, I think it was just more looking for advice. Just because, like we said, you know, Heather and Ron are having success out mutations. You know, we're F1, F2 on what they're working with. Like, you know, it's good to know that we need to outbreed early. With us putting northern blood into the albinos early on with the stock we have, you think it's still going to be like an F2 or F2 generation we could run into issues? Or do you think we'll be okay?
Yeah, F2, F3. I believe you will encounter issues no matter what you do at F2, F3. But, you know, it basically means that those guys that have the setups and have the ability to do the outbreeding, once they've done one outbreeding, it isn't a case of saying, oh, that's it, I don't need to do it again. It needs to be part of your breeding program. I mean, for me, you know, here every year I'm doing X amount of outbreeding and then X amount of replication, which involves the inbreeding of cousins, etc. But if I'm doing no outbreeding in a given year, you know, that's totally counterproductive. And that's my primary focus every year is outbreeding. And that's what it needs to be for people like Ron and Heather, you know.
Respect. And like you said, with a lot of snake projects, you don't see that. But, you know, in a lot of lizard, gecko projects, so you said skink projects, I find that stuff pops up a lot more when it comes to deformities within a couple of generations when you talk mutations or inbreeding.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, like you say, it's uniform when you see it in other lizard species too. The lizards is a different gig, mate. You know, people have to put a little bit more thought process and a little bit more effort into it. And there are animals that don't breed as well as others, and that's to be a little bit more understanding of what you're taking on when you're getting into breeding bluey mutations.
Yeah, respect.
So do you think the main reason some of them don't breed the best is inbreeding, or just their actual behavior?
Oh, a bit of all of the above, really. I mean, you're always going to get animals that don't perform as well as others, but I think, unfortunately, that I alluded to earlier, the original pure Eastern Hypers and albinos were where we all had to learn a lesson, you know. And now that they've been outbred, I mixing Kimberley blood through the albinos in Australia, which I was fortunate to be the one that did it. That it was only at that point that they were able to become common in everybody's collections, because those that had bought the original albinos had zero success with them.
Interesting.
And it wasn't until you got a bit of that northern mongrel through them that you managed to put actual lizards out there, you know.
Yeah, we talk about the success that they've had. Again, Heather, we had 2 albinos float around the industry in the United States. I think they were both males for at least the last 10 to 12 years, I want to say. And they changed hands multiple times. And to this day, I don't think they ever bred.
Yeah, and that was the case with many of those original albinos. And I think the reason for my success was that I acquired 9 individuals, I think it was, and I got literally, there was 3 of them that were all nice pets. Don't get me wrong. That's actually one of them in the background on that poster there. There was a male and a female. There was a male that decided he wanted to have a couple of years where he was a good breeder, and there was a female that dropped babies for 5 years in a row, and that sort of kicked it off and put some diversity out there, you know. So yeah, it was just the fact that I bought a few animals that I was lucky enough to get a couple that worked. And the same with the white northerns and the hypers. I know Roger will tell his stories about whites where he's had success where others failed, and that was the case with those, you know. Yeah, it just needed those right animals in the right hands to kick them off. Otherwise, they stalled, and that's what I think's happened to you guys over there. And you finally got some of the right animals in the right hands of the people that again. The other factor that I go on about is again that right latitude, you know, the geographic location, just everything. The stars have aligned, if you like, for Ron and Heather, and they're the ones that need to make sure that it sticks.
Yeah, no, I love what the Florida guys are doing, because it's starting to get contagious. A lot of these guys are breeding their boots on outside in Florida. Very jealous to see that. Manny with Tiki Geckos and Dave are doing that. Heather and Ron are doing that. I wish I lived in a warmer climate where I could start doing things like that.
Yeah.
What about a greenhouse?
What's that?
Greenhouse? I'm not building a greenhouse.
Yeah, being English, I know exactly what you're talking about. There's not much cause for a greenhouse down here in Australia. You'd find yourself cooked pretty quickly. But some of those greenhouses, I actually kept some iguanas in a greenhouse for a little while when I was younger in England. I think there's perhaps something to be said for that.
Interesting.
So you work with a lot of blotch mutations also. How did those start? Like the process begin with those?
Well, the first mutation in blotches, and that's a good photo. The one on the left there, that's your pinstripe, and that works the same as the patternless blueies in the easterns. In that, you've got visual hets, and I acquired a visual het from a guy that I knew down in Victoria, and thought there was some potential there, and I put it over a wild type. Paired the progeny back together, and lo and behold, that single copy het was the recipe for a superform patternless like the one you see on the left. Then the one in the middle is an exanthic, which again, that was a single individual that was bought out of a pet shop in Victoria, and I actually pestered, if you like, the guy that had got it, and I managed to get him to sell it to me. That proved out to be a black-eyed classic exanthic, compared it to the pinstripe on the left, and there you've got your first blotchy in double homozygous form at the top there, and xanthic pinstripe. In blotchies too, there are hypermelanistic individuals. I'm working with one of those at the moment. There's also albinos which exist in Tasmania. I don't have any of that stuff. I'm sure at some point it'll end up here on the mainland. And also another project I'm working on is a high white blotchy, which I haven't really shared yet because I don't really have the results to share. But I've got what I'm hoping to be really light hets that make something that's quite a bit lighter. So yeah, the blotchies have the same potential as syncoides. I think over the next 10, 15 years, you'll see it.
Okay. The Tasmanian albino, with the blotchies in Tasmania being completely different color, what's that albino like? Is it a little more mute in color, or is it actually kind of nice?
It's very similar in color to the T-negative Easterns, but obviously, yeah, it's got those oranges and yellows, but obviously just with the different scale formation of blotchies. It's actually very similar, David, to be honest.
Okay, I didn't know, because the Tasmanians in general have a little more of that like greenish and bluish kind of tone, I guess, for the blotchies.
Yeah, they do. They have sort of a thicker, deeper pigment set, don't they? But hey, I've never seen one. There's a guy that I know that has them down there, and we can't have access to it. It's illegal to export anything from Tassie again now. There was a time when we could get them illegally from there, but now they made it illegal again. So for the moment, that mutation is freeze-framed in Tassie, but I think that there are avenues that can be explored to get permits to get some of that stuff down the track.
Okay, interesting.
Why is that?
Like...
Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, bud. No, you're good, man.
Is that just because it's a different government that runs it?
Yeah, Australia's got different rules in different states for reptiles, and they all have their own import and export rules. Some are more relaxed than others. Some are a downright pain in the butt. But yeah, it's odd that the same country doesn't have one rule.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, we don't really have any trouble here for the most part. I mean, there are states that you need certain permits to work with species that are native, but for the most part, we just don't get that here.
Yeah.
But anything else going on with your blotchies right now? You got the patternless, you got your xanthic project. Anything else?
All
the white side thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a guy in Tassie too with a patchwork version as well. So, look, in blotchies, not all here. I mean, I've got this white thing that I'm trying to make float, but that's nothing yet. I've got the hyper, the pinstripe, and the xanthic. So that's at 3, maybe 4. But there's albinos out there, and there's a patchwork out there. So that's 6 in itself. So, in syncoides, there's 8 mutations, and in blotchies, there's 6 of those already. So, albeit harder to replicate, but they'll slowly chug along behind and catch up over time, I reckon.
You mentioned earlier you're keeping all your blotch outside to breed them.
Yeah, I get a good weather response up here because it's a bit warmer up here, but still get a good cold snap in the middle of the winter, and that just seems enough to breed the blotchies for me here. The cold snap here for some of my mutation syncoides is enough to knock them around a little bit. So I tend to keep all those indoors in winter, but that frees up the space for the blotchies. But then in summer, it's a bit humid here, so I then tend to put the blotchies inside in summer because I can keep them a bit drier. And at that point, I can put the syncoides out because they don't seem to react inadvertently to the humidity, So I have a good rotation policy here for inside and outside.
Yeah, the high humidity down in Florida, I thought was going to cause an issue. Years ago, I had heard some people that were having respiratory issues with their blue tongues because they were keeping them on a damp cypress mulch, and that could have been the lack of airflow.
You will get that. You will get that. For sure.
Yeah, so I didn't know if it'd be an issue with humidity levels being so high in Florida, but it doesn't seem to be affecting them when it comes to their health.
Yeah. And it depends on the individual. Some individuals are more susceptible to respiratory problems than others. I personally have issues with shinglebacks here because they're not local to this area, and that's obviously the reason why. Because as soon as you get a tropical spell, they tend to succumb to bacterial, fungal issues and respiratory as a result of that. So, yeah, you will find that. Blueies are not that easy to keep, and when you've got them on the genuinely got them on the wrong latitude, you will come up with problems, even here in Australia.
Interesting. Well, I have a couple shingle questions, just out of curiosity. So I've always been under the impression that a lot of them bond for life in the wild and will travel somewhere between 1 to 4 miles every year to find each other. Have you ever heard that?
Look, there's plenty of information about that, saying that shinglebacks bond for life. But my theory, and I'm not saying I'm right, is that I reckon it's just toey males following females. And I think at the end of the day, because they live in broad areas, the male is programmed to follow a female around. And once he loses that female, he'll generally find another one.
Okay.
But yes, there's some smarts there. And I do think they form some compatibility and comfort with a partner. But the extent of monogamy, I think, is a little bit romanticized because, I've had it here where a male will mate multiple females in the same setup. So,
yeah. Okay. There is a breeder in the United States that has had some success with shingles. He's done it quietly. I've been lucky enough to have a couple conversations, but he had actually switched his pairings up from one season to the other and still had success with babies. He had triplets in one of his litters, and he had two slug outs or one slug out where there were twins, or at least two undeveloped ovums. So I was just curious because that was the excuse in the United States for years is, again, we had shingles here, but everybody made it seem like they bond for life, and we had thought maybe that was why people weren't successful.
I think it's a romantic notion, David, and I don't think it's really substantiated at the end of the day. I think a good toey male presented a ripe, conditioned, perfectly female he's not going to knock it back.
That's fair. We're just killing rumors right now, buddy. I'm just letting you know what I hear.
But I do think they maybe have a little bit more intelligence than some of the other blue tongue species in that, they do have their favorites and they tend to they just follow each other around a little bit. So there's a little bit in it, but the level that was documented, I believe, was disproportionate. And I think the photos where you've got an animal squashed on the road and an animal looking at it, pining for it, I think, he obviously gotten used to following it round, but I think it's simply that, any further is it's just over romanticized.
Yeah, I know the pictures you're talking about. They're really heartbreaking.
Yeah, I can't be sure, but I would warrant a bet that the one that didn't get squashed is the male, and he's looking over his female, and he didn't really get what he wanted.
Yeah.
Whereas I think if it's the other way around, the female would just scarper off into the bush until another male found her. But that's just my thoughts on it.
I do a lot of field herping here, and if that was an American toad, the male still would have got it, even though she was crushed in the road. Nothing stops those guys from getting it.
There's examples of blue tongues doing that as well. A toey male will go to town on whatever, anything that tricks him into thinking it's what he's chasing.
Hey, for each their own, man. For each their own.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
When you dealt with the bacterial infection in the shinglerbacks, what did you do to fix it?
It's actually quite a simple fix on all of your blue tongues if you get it early enough. As soon as you see those red scales, then you need to be treating it with a product called Lamisil, which is basically just a athlete's foot cream. May not even have the same brand name over there, but any athlete's foot cream, if you give it a good wiping over any of those raised red scales, you'll get rid of it. Don't dart towards antibiotics because it won't do anything.
Interesting.
Because they're
Is
not
that
those scale issues are not bacterial; they're fungal.
okay? Now, are we talking about like post breeding, like females that maybe get a little bit of irritation from the males biting on them, and you're getting the raised scale of pus and red?
No, I mean that that's sebaceous. That's generally bacterial. I thought you meant the raised scales that you get that are reddened that eventuate into scale rot, where chunks of the animal will peel off. You know what I mean? Where the scales will drop off. Tends to come under the belly and then the arms, and yeah. Is that what you meant, Alex? Or
Well, whatever you were talking about that you experienced from the bacteria and the shinglebacks you had, whether it was full scale rot or just
yeah, I found it's fungal scale rot, and,
Okay.
and I find that those animals, I believe, because they've got a larger scale, different scale formation. Same with the westerns, same with the blotches to a certain degree as well. They're very susceptible to it, whereas syncoides exposed to it don't tend to succumb to it. And under veterinary advice or some veterinary work, it was found that it's something like yellow fungus or something like that, and that some of those subspecies are particularly sensitive to that. But yes, there are other bacterial issues that can be treated by antibiotics as well. But it's important to recognise the difference between bacterial and fungal and viral.
Yeah.
Are we allowed to dabble on viral?
Yeah, why not?
So is it nidovirus that you guys have in skinks and also carpet pythons, or is it just carpet pythons?
I think they're two different things. That when you're talking, I don't think you should be bucketing snakes with lizards with that. I think it's categorically proven that you know that those viruses don't jump species to that degree. The nidovirus in blue tongues is endemic. There is some argument to suggest that, there's proof to suggest that heaps of them carry it, and it doesn't. In many cases, doesn't even show. I mean, there's a guy that I was recently speaking to that works at a place that that has intervention on stuff that gets smuggled and at a zoo, and they test all the stuff that comes in, and they reckon the numbers as high as 90% plus that actually test positive for nidovirus, and 75% of those don't even show any symptoms. So it's an endemic virus that really tends to come to the fore in weak animals.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I don't think you're ever going to get rid of it in blue tongue. It's part of their makeup, kind of thing. I'm not saying it's genetic, but it's endemic, and when it's endemic, it's like beak and feather in birds. You know, it's endemic to the species. You're not going to get rid of it. It's there. You know.
No,
and there's animals. Go on.
There's a lot of species here where I think people have come to terms with that, with certain viruses where, you know, if the animals are kept properly and there's nothing that's causing a stress to their immune system, a lot of time you'll never see them shedding the virus.
And also we can go back to your inbreeding again here too. If you're producing nice strong animals with nice strong immune systems, you're not going to get animals which succumb to any viral load, not just nidovirus, any of the dozens of viruses that can affect lizards is going to be minimized if you're producing strong lizards from the outset. And that goes for bearded dragons, it goes for snakes, it goes for anything in the captive game.
Interesting. All right, cool. Yeah, I've always enjoyed the virus talk, and it's something that a lot of people don't want to talk about. It's like the least sexy thing about breeding reptiles. But, I've heard of plenty of things over the years, but I don't think there's ever been a catastrophic fallout in the United States with any of these collections. But I have heard of cases of Nido popping up in the United States.
Yeah, and look, I think it's something people need to get more comfortable about talking about, because it's not the witch in the room kind of thing. It's not, who's got the lurgy or whatever. All blue tongues are going to carry some form of viral load at some point, and I think it's just some understanding of that which people need to have, rather than soon as something succumbs to a virus, going on a witch hunt, trying to seclude somebody from a hobby over it. I think that's the fear. And that fear is basically just driven by lack of education, as with everything,
I agree with that.
I've become more knowledgeable about it over time, because I've been subjected to, we keep birds as well, and there's a virus that pops up in those guys the same, and some of these animals that you can test negative for a virus could still be carrying it. Just not shedding, it's just a false negative, And animals have a viral status. They can either not have the virus, they can be carrying it, or they can be shedding it, and some animals with the right care can improve their immune systems and get rid of it. And animals born with these immune systems may end up carrying a virus for their whole lives, but never actually shed it,
Yeah. No,
that's as much as I know about it. You'd have to talk to a vet for more information than that, but that's what I've been sort of educated to the level of, and having got that education, it doesn't scare me like it used to,
That's great. Were you about to say that, Alex?
I was going to say, I think there's a couple different versions of nidovirus too. So that could, some of those you guys might not ever see in Australia, if it's coming from ball pythons, for example, you guys don't have it over there.
The argument is jumping from species to species. And I know there have been some things that have been able to, but I don't know about snake to lizard like Joe was saying.
Yeah, to my knowledge, and that was veterinary info that I've been given, that Josh Linus here in Australia does quite a bit on virology, and he seemed to think that it's not possible to jump from snakes to lizards, and same with adenovirus from dragons to skinks. He seemed to think that that's not possible either. So that's the information I've been given. I don't want to come across as some kind of oracle on it. I'm only rehashing bits of information that I've been given.
No, we're all doing the same thing here. Like you said, none of us are vets, but when you're around enough animals, you start seeing things, and you sometimes have a better understanding than a lot of vets. But one thing here, I know that they're talking, I think Ron St. Pierre, there might be somebody that's going to be publishing a paper on it soon, but I believe it was something along the lines of putting carpet pythons in an incubator at a certain set temperature when they were shedding the virus, and after being, I believe, kept in an incubator for X amount of days or weeks, just the heat is actually suppressing the virus in their system and clearing it up when they're shedding it. Now, those details, I know there's going to be a lot more to it. That's just a bare minimum of what I've heard about it.
Yeah, and then that, I guess, can lead to the animal parceling the virus up and then just becoming a carrier. Yeah, and then you start to get into needing to understand how the immune system works, so on and so forth. So, another level of knowledge for me.
Yep, I agree.
From where I'm at, yeah.
So how's your book coming?
Oh, yeah. From a text perspective, it's done. It's just that the graphic designers at the moment, there is, however, which you guys have probably seen, a book which I've contributed to here, which is part of the Danny Brown book trilogy. I mean, that's two of them there. He's done heaps of books on all of the Australian lizards and turtles and so on. And I was fortunate enough to do a section of my own in this on mutations in skinks in Australia. So yeah, it's just a sort of a summary, really. It's not huge, but it covers a lot of what's been found here in Australia.
Yeah, very cool. Congrats on that.
Yeah, thanks for that. Well, I thank Danny Brown. It was a bit easy for me just to write a chapter. I didn't have to do the publishing or any of the other stuff. I found that in doing my other book, there's quite a bit to actually getting it off the ground, you know.
Do you have a date you hope to release that?
Early next year.
Okay, that's not too bad.
Yeah.
What? Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna ask, do you know how much like it's gonna be or anything like that yet, or wait and see?
Oh, I don't know, mate. I'm not sure. I don't know. Depends how big it comes back at when because there's a vet section that's going in it. There's a WA keeper that's doing a shingleback section. We've got a natural history section that's gone in it. There's my own section on mutations. Then there's a section on husbandry, breeding, and then sort of a bit of a fun section on blue tongues and the internet, you know, sort of modern day stuff with expos and internet use. So when it comes together, it may well be quite large, and it just depends on what size format we're going to go in, whether we're going to go at this size or whether we're going to go A4. I'm not sure. I'd like to keep it sort of at the sort of $60-70 mark, but I don't know.
Fair. What are shows like in Australia nowadays? Are you guys still having trade shows to sell reptiles?
It's actually picked up again recently. There's a here in Queensland anyway. There's a chick that's taken it on, Elizabeth Randall up here. She's taken it on and got it flying again up here, and we've managed to be able to get it so we can sell reptiles again. So it's quite healthy here in Queensland at the moment. New South Wales has always had a healthy expo tradition, and the same with Victoria. So there's there's 3 or 4 in New South Wales every year, a couple in Victoria, and one up here. So yeah, and the old one in WA occasionally too. So it's not massive, mate, but it happens, you know. Yeah.
Do you make time to go to these shows?
I've displayed at the Queensland ones, the majority of the Queensland ones, and hard for me to display interstate because of the interstate rules. You have to do all the movement advices to get your reptiles interstate. So I've never actually displayed interstate, but I have done talks at all the different herp societies interstate. Actually, yeah, there's Alex got one of my little display vids up there. Yeah, I have done talks interstate at different expos, so I've attended in that capacity.
Okay. When it comes to displaying your animals on a table in Australia, are there any size requirements for containers?
No, I haven't really encountered them, to be honest. Any real guidelines on it? Yeah, I guess because it's sort of a more beaten path in America, that's come to pass.
Well, it's pretty loose in the United States. I know Europe has a lot of rules on that kind of thing.
Yeah, nothing I've seen yet. I mean, we've got rules on keeping, but there isn't a published document that gives specific dimensions and all that kind of stuff. You know, I'm sure it'll happen eventually.
Okay.
There's usually precedents that lead to that kind of stuff, isn't there? It's usually dickheads doing things without any common sense, which lead to rules coming into play that really should have been adhered to all along.
Silly times, buddy. Silly times.
Yeah, and that's the way all that stuff rolls. You know.
Yeah. What was I going to ask you? I want to talk a little dieting. I had recently heard from somebody that too many eggs in your diet for skinks could actually cause a little bit of puffiness in the eyes, almost like a little bit of a kind of like an underroll underneath the eyelid, kind of coming up. You ever heard of anything like that?
Not with egg. No, I'm a big user of egg. I make a mix which has quite a bit of egg in it. I find that egg is the best. Is one of the best, or one of the things that blueies love the most. And you can get any type of food into a blue tongue's gut if you cover it in egg. So my mix does contain raw eggs. I've never really seen any adverse effect, but I'm not there running around giving a blue tongue a full egg every day, so I don't think I'm using it extensively either.
All right. Have you ever noticed anything you've incorporated in your diet that caused any health effects?
Not as such, no. But I think the big thing with blue tongues is not overfeeding them. I mean, yeah, sure, in their first year, while they've got the growth rates, you can almost feed them you can feed them to appetite. But I think once they're adults, it's the same as anything. You can only feed it sparingly, and I think then you'll come up against problems dietary if you suddenly decide that your blue tongue can be fed like a dog or a cat. Doesn't matter what you feed it, you're going to run into problems if you're feeding it 3 or 4 times a week. Doesn't really answer your question, but that for me is the biggest rule with blueies. Once they're adult size, they only really need a feed once a week.
Okay, and typically, I mean, I always talk to customers. Now, would you say you gauge the size of their meal based on the size of their head, or do you just put a big lump of food in there once a week and see what they do with it?
It's normally about sort of a tablespoonful of food, and that's enough for them.
Okay.
I find, yeah, and that's it. And I think that has an effect on all your breeding results and everything. I see a lot of overweight blue tongues on the internet, both stateside and here. But then that's just my opinion, Okay. And as soon as you start seeing those paunches ahead of those back legs, I think you've gone too far.
Okay.
I think a lot of these blueies need to be a lot leaner than I see. But again, that's my opinion. I don't want to come across as telling people.
You've been doing this for a while, buddy. You're allowed to have a strong opinion about anything you want. Any opinion from you means a lot to all of us.
Yeah.
So you like a once-a-week regimen based on your experiences. You still like feeding the younger ones maybe 3 times to 4 times a week, or do you do daily with your young?
Every third day for a young lizard, and I reckon for your adults, depending on their status, for your males once a week, for your females once a week, once they're up to the point where you feel that they're only feeding for maintenance, and I'll elaborate on that. A female that's just dropped babies, you need to load her with food to get that condition back again. But once any blue tongue is at its optimum size and weight, and you're only feeding for maintenance, and if you look up any format of feeding when you're working out how much energy in kilojoules an animal needs, they'll split it into groups. Maintenance, which is the amount that they need to maintain the current status, and then you'll be feeding further for growth if an animal's growing, and then you'll be feeding for additional energy requirements for a pregnant female. So you have to consider all those things. So an animal that you're only feeding for maintenance once a week, an animal that you're feeding for growth 2 to 3 times a week, and a female again that you're feeding that's replacing energy for after a litter, again, 2 or 3 times a week.
Okay.
Straightforward. I mean, the science behind that, but really, that's quite straightforward. But as a keeper, it's your responsibility to pick that. Once that animal is up to size and weight, it's not really good enough to go, oh, it's hungry, I'm going to feed it because I love it. No, it needs a different approach. You need a good slender animal is a good healthy animal.
Yeah, obesity in any reptile species, I think, is a negative. There's very few animals, I think, that handle obesity well, especially when it comes to lizards or anything with legs. So that was sort of my curiosity. Oh, what was that?
Don't have the pardon?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, yeah, I interrupted you. Yeah, reptiles are shockers. They're very easy to overfeed. And you have to think that. I mean, let's take Australia as an example. Why not? Because that's where we're at today. If you think of the boom and bust environments that we have here, a reptile's equipped to go weeks and months without food. To no adverse effect. Under no situation really is a reptile getting spoon-fed every 3rd day. Especially not for its whole life. So blue tongues in the wild here may go 2 months without a feed, and I think that's something we need to really consider when we're keeping these animals. It doesn't hurt for an adult blue tongue to not be fed for a couple of weeks, provided it's got the correct space, it's got access to water, it's got all the other bells and whistles. An adult male blue tongue does not need to be fed constantly.
Yeah, I've been talking to a lot of people about intermittent. Oh, he's gone. I've been talking to a lot of people about this intermittent fasting, and for human beings, and just the benefits. Just the reset on your immune system sometimes. So I do agree with you. I like a lot of the reading about cycling your food cycles based on the wet and dry season in nature, to where you give their body a little bit of a break, where you're not constantly putting food in the animal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So
I think as a keeper, the biggest thing that I encourage people to do is use your eyes. You've got to read that animal. You've got to understand what's going on in the given space that you've allocated for that animal. And that goes as far as heat, water, substrate, everything. A lot of people think, put it on a thermostat, leave it, that's it. Well, no, what's the animal doing? Where's the animal sitting? Is it at the hot end? Is it at the cold end? Is it in the middle of the cage? What's it doing? Let's set your temperatures up so that you can observe the right behavior. Not, the book says this temperature. She's right. No. What's the animal doing?
Yeah. I tell people that with their heat on their enclosure all the time. If you notice your animal is really staying away from the heat, it's probably too high. You want to see a balance of the animal moving back and forth from the hot side to the cool side.
Yeah, and not plastered to the cold side and not plastered to the hot side, sort of going and getting some heat and then sitting in the middle of the cage, just sort of, that kind of lurking in the middle of the cage in the middle of the day is probably what you're trying to achieve. And then basking at this time in the morning. I mean, now it's 10 in the morning. If we go down there, we can give you an example of that pied side that I just had out there. And you see her there?
Mm-hmm.
So there, you've got her.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah, so that's, we're just after 10 o'clock here, and that's what you want to see, You want to see your lizard basking. And then she can shift over to the middle of the cage once she hits optimum temperature.
Okay. Yeah. Is she being housed in that cage by herself?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Have you gotten away from most rack systems, and have you switched to mostly caging over the years?
I've a combination of 3 things, and that's probably the best, good segue to get to that. Interesting topic. I use outdoor cages, which you guys would know. Anybody that looks at any of my stuff know I've got extensive outdoor cages. I've also got an extensive number of racks. and I've also got an extensive number of 4-foot cages which have all got the relevant UV plugins. I find all three have a benefit. Obviously, outdoors for getting extreme UV and just a general reset works wonders, I think, for development of immune systems, etc., etc. Then racks are the other extreme. They give awesome privacy for growing blue tongues and keeping blue tongues in minimum stress. I think you can't stress the importance of racks, you know, because they literally have the full space to use without the fear of any, or what they perceive as a fear of predators, because there's sort of a component of darkness there. Whereas, you know, in these 4-foot cages, you quite often, when you enter a room, a blue tongue will run and hide, or the outdoor cages, they'll run and hide, hence only really using the hide areas. Whereas in a rack, any animal that is under stress or is needing to grow, or you're trying to get a lot of food into, I find the racks, you will get your best uptake of food because the stress levels are lower, because the animal has ultimate privacy. So yeah, as I've gone through that, you know, you've got advantages of all three, and your 4-foot cage is sort of the almost like a bit of both worlds. It's easier to implement UV, and it's also fairly private too. So anybody that's got any serious sort of, in my opinion, dreams of keeping large numbers of blue tongues, you need to consider at least 2 out of those 3.
Okay.
You know,
You
you do need some UV at some stage, whether it's in plugins or whether it's outdoors. So I'm sorry if people who don't use UV find that or want to argue that, that's fine, but that's my opinion. At some point, you're gonna need some source of UV for all your animals.
Okay, I remember talking to Don Patterson, and he's in, I believe, Vancouver, so pretty cold up in Canada where he lives. And he emphasized how he had outdoor enclosures for his gravid females, and in those rare times of the day where it was warm enough to put them outside for him to get some sun, he thought it was highly beneficial to his gravid females.
Absolutely. I'm English. I come from a cold climate, maybe not as cold as Don's. I used to put bearded dragons and a tortoise that I used to have, and a couple of iguanas outside. No real excuse, I don't think. I think we all have a couple of months of the year where you can get some of those animals outside. And also, who's to say you can't put some heat cord in the back of an enclosure too, you know?
Yeah.
So hard to do, I grant. I'm not saying it's easy, but I do think reptiles, well, you don't have to delve far into scientific papers to prove that most animals in the animal kingdom need some kind of exposure to UV for its D3 and immune system building qualities and make. Yeah.
We all benefit from a little sunlight.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So when you cut out earlier, I was talking to Alex, and I've had some trouble getting my female albino to lock. When I put a male in with them, or with her, they look scared shitless every time. Not because she's a male, there's just something about her that's very off-putting, I find, for my male. I had thought about possibly cooling her down in maybe a 6-foot enclosure with one other male. Do you advise against that for indoor enclosures? Do they do better in colonies outside?
Let me ask a question or two first. How many males have you tried on her?
I've only tried 2 or 3 because I really don't want to put something random on her. My only thing is... Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go. No, just finish what you're saying.
Well, my only concern was missing her window. Like, maybe she was actually wanting to breed later in the season than most of my northern stock. And I thought maybe having her with a male in an enclosure with a lot of area to get away from each other, when the time was right, maybe the male would breed her.
Yeah, my experience really would be that she isn't quite cycling properly somewhere along the line, because Yeah, I'm not a fan of cohabbing that kind of stuff because there's usually some kind of um, stress levels that you're not picking up when you've got syncoides housed together. It can be done successfully in large spaces, but for what you're trying to do, I think it's something along the lines of conditioning and her just not quite being where she needs to be. Are you keeping her in a 4-footer? Did you say?
So right now she is in a rack system at the moment. I was switching over to a 4-footer. I've had her in a 4-footer in the past. Last year, what I did is I cooled her in the rack system at the very bottom level, which was the coolest level of them all, and put her back into breeding. But tell you the truth, I've had her for about 8 years, and I haven't really tried to breed her that much. She's been more of a pet, but these last couple of years I have tried unsuccessfully.
Yeah, yeah. Hard to say, mate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Could be the fact that she's got some age on her. She might take a little bit of maybe try the feeding season. This is something that I've done on a couple of my females this year. I got a lava girl that I hadn't bred successfully. I gave her a mild course of antibiotics, and through last feeding season, I kept her a lot warmer. So I got her very, very active, so that if you like, gave her the opportunity to get the system really, really fired up during that time to pass anything that there is that's blocking anything. A little mild course of antibiotics if there's a bacterial burden on the reproductive tract, and then go for your cooling from there. Don't underestimate how much heat you can punch into these animals during the feeding season. That might be where your solution lies. Go hotter, mild course of antibiotics, give it another shot. But yeah, and don't underestimate the fact that she may be stressed in a 4-foot cage. This is where I'm saying that people immediately default to being apologetic, like you did a little there about having her in a rack. Some animals perform better in racks, and this is where I won't be apologetic. Racks, in a lot of cases, are better than 4-foot cages and outdoor cages, and a whole series of results there are to back that up.
So I agree with them. It's not broken, don't fix it. And I have had success in the past, but I will say there's a part of me, just it being a lizard species, I do want to start thinking about putting in the caging. I know there's going to be some.
You need some access to UV, but I think people need to understand that they can have both.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this whole movement against racks, I just think that's uneducated. The problem is you need a combination. It's like you were saying about people liking pure and wild types over mutations. There's space for all of the above, and all of these things have advantages for different people and different scenarios.
Do you keep males in cages, or do you mainly have your males in rack systems?
Mate, over a 12-month cycle, there wouldn't be any lizard that doesn't either go in a 4-foot with some UV or outside. But at the same time, there wouldn't be a lizard that doesn't end up in a rack at different times as well. For instance, all my blotches will end up in a rack to birth. Why not? Stress-free. It's like, there's no overhead disruptions outside. There's nobody looking through the glass in a 4-foot cage. Get any put them in a rack, let them birth in there. They're going to be much happier. And then afterwards you can get the condition back on the animal quicker. And then once the animal's optimum, let's put it back outside again or whatever. I'd sooner see people take that kind of approach rather than saying, "Oh, I've got my lizards in racks and that's the end of it," or "They're in 4-footers and that's the end of it."
Yeah. So I always feel like new product lines really just need to be something that helps the community. And I've always thought that, if there was an LED or some kind of flexible light that can go inside the rack systems, to provide UVA, UVB to them, that'd be amazing. Where you can pretty much just modify what you already have. But unfortunately, I've heard there's a lot of hang-up with LED, UVA, and B.
Oh, look, LED's used readily throughout the fish industry now. So look, the LED stuff in the reptile game is coming, whether you like it or not. We're going to get it right. I've sampled a few of them, and I've bred with them. I mean, some of the powers that be that claim that some of these lights aren't quite right, so be it. But I've used them and bred them successfully under LED, UVs. Yeah, they might say longevity, this, that, the other, or whatever, but that technology is being refined and it is coming. So I just think some people love to pull apart what other people are trying to do, and I also think that change is always met with a little bit of resistance, isn't it? But go have a look at the fish industry. You wouldn't find any lights that don't use LED now.
Right, interesting. I like that. Go ahead, Alex. You got something, man? Let's go hard for 10.
Pardon?
If you lived in the USA, what blue tongue projects would you work with?
I don't know. If I lived in the USA, I'd probably go more down the iguana route, to be honest.
Okay.
I like that kind of thing. A bit like my Cunningham skinks. I love those lizards that kind of land in that space between skinks and monitors, you know. And I think the iguanas and the mutations they offer would be where I'd be throwing my line in the water anyway. I'd probably have some blueies, but my focus would be on those.
Interesting. So green iguanas.
Yeah, I love the mutations in those.
Yeah.
I love all that stuff that Tom Crutchfield's got and other keepers.
Yeah, the crimson albinos and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, as you know, I've worked with a lot of monitors, so I have a big love for monitors. But I just love that mid-sized. You know, you've got parentes and that real big stuff, and your Asian water monitors, great. But I love that stuff like your iguanas. It's sort of that mid-size between the two. That's a bit more handleable, and it's got mutations in it as well. You know, that's kind of where I get excited. Yeah, it kind of ticks the box for everything. You know.
What about any snake species you could work with?
Snakes. I've done quite a bit of carpet python stuff here. I guess over there, I'd probably have a play with some of the ball pythons. I like some of the mutations. Yeah, but never really thought about that one, to be honest. Some of the milk snakes are pretty cool.
Yeah.
But I've always been a lizard breeder.
Yeah, respect.
I do have a pair of xanthic black-headed pythons though. Still, I used to have a couple of hundred snakes, but I'm down to just 2 now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got a pair of xanthic blackheads myself. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, she's just here, my favorite one here. I'll just get her out for you. So yeah, she's got that sort of reduced pattern and silver patches on her chin. She's a pretty cool snake.
Yeah, back in the day, one of my favorite things to do was following, I believe it was the Kick Brothers in Australia.
Yeah, the K Brothers. They live just down the road from me.
That's
one
wonderful.
of my early inspirations in Australia, the Kuligoski family for sure.
Wow, that's really cool. I love that.
I still actually speak to Denver.
Do zoos in Australia ever work with breeders or scientists, or not too much?
Okay, you still there?
Yeah, you got them?
Can you hear us?
Lost you.
Completely. Give it a second. He doesn't know we can see him right now.
I think what happened there, my wife just got in the car and the car picked up the audio.
Okay. Lucky her.
It's all right. It's all right, George. It's only a podcast, but yeah. So I lost you for a few seconds.
Do we wrap up on that note? Did we just hit a wall?
No. Can you hear me now?
Oh, we can hear you now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So have you worked with any zoos or universities before?
I do know a guy that's recently acquired a reptile park up the road, but I've never actually done any work with them as such. Um, what's the angle that you're angling? That you're looking at exporting, aren't you? That's where you're
No,
taking
he
this.
wasn't getting there with that. We don't need you anymore. We got Ron and Heather.
With zoos and stuff don't really work with a lot of breeders here. I don't know if it was more open sharing on some stuff or if it's still kind of closed. They see themselves.
Yeah, I look. I don't want to get negative about it, but the zoo industry always seems to keep themselves aside from the keeping industry, and it feels like there's sort of a bit of a sort of a regal nature to them, that they are who they are and we are who we are. Yeah, I've never really seen much collaboration with zoos and keepers.
Yeah, I mean, even my experience in the United States, if a reptile department, if an animal gives a random litter or a clutch of eggs, they typically just euthanize them all. Like, there's really no drive to reproduce in captivity when it comes to zoos on a lot of projects.
Yeah, and they like to scorn upon it and somehow feel that they're the only ones that should be allowed to keep any kind of reptiles, because I guess it's kind of a moral high ground, but really it's their financial interests, and that if they're the only one with the cool animals, then everybody's got to go and line their pockets. That's my angle on it, anyway.
Someone asked in the comments about seasonal introductions. Do you have any issues when you bring them from like outside, inside, and back? Like for breeding, does that cause issues bringing them inside and outside?
Yeah, you got to make sure you're doing that stuff at the right time. Like if I'm going to breed all my syncoides inside, which I do, I want them all inside before the temperature drops. I want them all inside and still in their full eating boots, if you like, still in full eating mode and inside, so that they can all be cooled in the same room. And same as the blotches that I cool outside and have them inside during summer, I'll kick them at once the humidity dies off, which it does here in late summer or autumn. I'll get them all outside at the same time. So yeah, absolutely. You need everything in line. I can't just have a female that's in season inside and go and put her outside to a male.
Yeah, so you got to do a lot more planning.
Yeah, you got a plan. You want them in the same racks. You want your males at the bottom and your females at the top, and all those kind of things. All those little thought processes need to come into play, and also even in the same room. Like, you see some of my racks there. Let's say that rack in the corner there, the first one, the animals that I want to mate together, I would want them all in that rack, because that rack there's at this end of the room, whereas when you go to the other end of the room, that's sort of the exit, and that rack on the end there is going to be cooler than the rack sort of on this end. So it makes sense that you're going to keep the animals that you want to pair together in the same rack at the same end of the room, because each one of those singular degrees of difference on your ambient temperatures is probably going to equate to a couple of days of alignment when it comes to breeding season.
Do you want to elaborate a little more on keeping your males in the lower part of the rack?
Just because you want to get them a little bit cooler, I guess. Just a little bit cooler than the female, so that you're actively promoting good sperm production. And also during mating season, I don't like to get them too hot too often. You want them just a little bit cooler so that they mate for a little bit longer. Still getting them hot in the day, but they get the chance to drop to a cooler temperature at night.
It seemed for mine, I was able to extend the male's windows a little longer that way.
Yeah. You just like to think that just
Yeah.
switching off a little more. They're just go on. Lost you.
No.
Still there, Alex?
Yep, I'm here. Dave's rejoining.
Yeah, you just like to think that your males are switching off at night. That's all, and your females have got sort of a more even swing in ambience, especially during the mating window.
All right. One more thing in the rumor mill. Some people like to work to the males and shed out before pairings. Do you ever put that in consideration before breeding them?
Yes and no. You will generally find that females will shed after mating. I'll just put that aside first. Your females generally don't shed before mating, and that's sort of 90% of them in my experience. Your females will come into season. They'll the system will switch on. You'll find a bit of defecation in the cage. And then they're generally good to go. Your males, I reckon, depending on when they shed prior to going into cooling, if a male has just shed prior to going into cooling, he'll come into his mating window without shedding. But a male that has shed a while before going into cooling will more often than not go into slough and then come out of the shed and then start mating. So it's a loose correlation for males that they will shed after a slough after cooling, but it's not necessarily a tight correlation. Make sense?
So, yes, this past season for me personally, my females went in the shed almost immediately after getting them out of cooling. Does that mean they might have been up for a little longer than I realized?
I can only go off what mine do, and mine, very, very few of my females will slough until 2 to 3 weeks after mating. I would suggest that may be that you're mildly offline somewhere.
Okay.
But
shed you're getting?
Pardon?
Oh, the shed you're getting, not to jump a little further ahead with this, but post-ovulation sheds. Have you guys have any documentation on post-ovulation sheds and how many days after you get babies?
That's what I reckon your females do. They come out of brumation. They will, the digestion and system will switch on. They'll be receptive to mating. They will be, they'll have those 2-3 matings or whatever you decide to run with, and then you'll start to feed them, and then at that point, they will, they'll take on some food, they'll ovulate, and they'll go into slough around that time.
Okay. And what I was asking too with that post-ovulation shed, do you count out the days until you get your litter at that point?
I usually find that it's a trimester thing. So, and this is where you might find it different if yours are sloughing soon as they're coming out of heat. I find that they come out of brumation mating, and then their first shed is at about 30 days, and then they'll have another slough 30 days later, and then, or 40 days later, then they'll have their babies loosely anywhere from 5 days to 15 days after that second slough. So I record 2 sloughs post-mating before birth.
Okay, cool. That's good to know, man. I feel like that's something that no one's ever really nailed down. I feel like it's just been a lot of guessing.
I would say my data over a large animal collection would give you something to chew on with that. I can document that. I've actually documented it in the book, but that's something that I found over my collection, and I'm mating varies, but sort of 70 or 80 females,
Okay. Yeah.
And I find that as a rule, 90% follow that pattern, that trimester pattern. Your first trimester being coming out of breeding, then mating, then a slough, then the second trimester is just a ravenous appetite, baby growth, visual distension of the animal where where it's getting big, then another slough, then your babies, anywhere from 5 to 15 days after that.
Okay, cool.
Mm.
Alex?
I was just thinking in my head like what mine did. Like it seems like it varies a little different, but also some of mine are not 100% grown, so they might have another growth shed in there too on top of that.
Yeah, there's a few factors which go into it, but yeah.
Hmm.
There's
Do
other
you?
people there's other people that will tell you that their females shed before mating, but yeah, and that's what you're saying, but that's not my experience, so I can't really comment on it.
Um, so I have noticed because I've bred in so many different parts of the country. I've been in New York, I've been in North Carolina, I've been in Ohio, and now I'm in Missouri. And that's been over the course of the last like 12 years of my life. And I've bred skinks in all these different states. But I just happened to notice this past season, and it might have been me waiting too long to wake him up. My male was grabbing the females, and the shed was stopping him from getting a good grab because he was sliding
Yeah.
off the female, pulling that off.
Yeah, you see, that's a problem, isn't it? I won't mate a female in slough.
Yeah.
The odd one that does go into slough when she comes out of season, I find that I wait for them to shed, and I will often find with those couple of females that do that, they're less receptive. That's why I sort of lent to you that maybe that's not quite right. But that's just like I say, I can only comment on mine.
No. Well, let me go in a little more detail on my failures in case anybody else fails like I did. Everything you're saying right now makes a lot of sense because I almost had to wait for some of my females to shed out before I did my pairings. And for the first time ever, I had 19 slug outs out of 22 litters this year. So I think that shed might have been too late in their cycle, and a lot of them had maybe already ovulated from that stimulation, and the male didn't actually copulate in time to, become gravid.
Yeah, that would be my take on it, David, for sure.
Yeah.
But again, I don't want to appear to say that what I'm saying is it's just my experience. I think you're a bit late in your matings.
Yeah, I think they woke up a little early on me this year. It was a weird winter and a weird spring. I should have kept a closer eye on them.
And mate, what you're doing is, you're talking to a guy that's in the same spot every year. I mean, the locality where they come from, like it's totally different to a guy that's living in the northern hemisphere and is moving around. Your challenges are far deeper than mine.
Yeah, unfortunately.
But then I found that with stuff that's trying to breed stuff that's not from here too. All those issues.
Yeah. It was just shell shocking, but honestly, everything you're saying right now makes a lot of sense, and it makes a lot of sense why my year was what it was based on the shed cycles you're talking. So I believe everything you're saying right now based on what happened to me this breeding season. I don't know, maybe.
Yeah.
So John,
have a look at it, Alex, with yours and your next breeding cycle, and I would hazard a bet as to say that your best litters will come from females that have shed twice during their pregnancy.
Well, I think the hard part for me, I've paid more attention to the males shed for actual breeding than paid attention to the number of females shedding. I guess I was more worried on pairing than I guess I was, whether it's 100 days that they give birth or 120, they just give birth when they give birth. So I didn't really try to time it based off that.
Yeah. So when he's talking like 100 days, a lot of United States breeders count the days after locking the female with the male. But I've always thought that was kind of loose. You know what I mean? Like that's a hard thing to go on.
It's always going to be loose, isn't it? Because it's not, you might mate them 3 times over the course of 2 weeks. And who's to say when the female ovulates,
Yeah.
And something I often do, I do as a rule now, once I've done that last lock, I will offer some food. and I'll try and get that female into sort of a higher space in the rack or wherever, somewhere a little bit warmer, to kick her system along a little bit. So I think it's difficult to gauge because there's different that alludes to the fact that there's different factors that influences gestation length, and I think in a cold-blooded animal that's definitely the case. So
okay,
you're talking about an ectotherm, not a mammal, so it's not going to be as tight a boundary, is it?
No. Well, how about this? And this can be my last question. I'm going to let Alex take it from there. But what is your month leading into cooling looking like for diets? And then what you're saying is when you take your animals out of cooling, you breed them before you feed them?
Yes, absolutely. I will. The weather starts to cool down here in May, so I'll switch all heat off in May. I'll offer no food at all during May and June, and no heat at all during those. Then I will start introducing heat sort of around the 10th of July, something like that. And then sort of or the start of July, loosely anywhere there. And then I'll start pairing mid to late July also, once the animals are warmed up.
Okay. So April leading up to May, do you feed?
I'll feed in April, but not in May. None of my blue tongues will get any food through May and June and July. The animals that I will then feed are females once they've been mated, and I'll offer food to males once they finish their mating schedule.
Okay.
So yeah, no food until after mating for me. But
okay.
Some people will offer a little bit of food to get the digestion going. Yeah, I get that, but that's just the way I do it.
And you made a comment that your animals will defecate when they're starting to come out of cooling, when they their system starts moving. Now, is that
you'll get a little bit of defecation, which is from something that's just in the gut from last year. You'll find a tiny little bit of poop, little bit of urate, and a little bit of greenish or dark brown poop. You'll just you can basically tell that the system is up and running. They're basking as well.
Mm-hmm.
A female that is sitting at the cold end, if you grab her and try and mate her, she's not going to be receptive. She needs to be actively basking, some sign of defecation in the cage, and she's nice and warm, and then generally they'll be receptive at that point.
Okay. And so that defecation, that, like you said, it's meals that have sat in it over that 2-month period without heat. Do you ever have any concerns about food rotting in their belly while in cool down?
No, because I'll stop feeding at the start of May, and I'll probably leave the heat on for an extra week, just so you get everything out of the system. But May here is still got quite a bit of warmth, so they tend to get 99% of it out of their system. Okay. The gradual drop off takes care of that.
Okay. Go ahead, Alex, man. I might have something, but I'm good for a minute.
So John asked what your thoughts were on females being kept colder late-term gestation than warmer ambience, because he had females that, I'll pull it up, the females he thought were too hot and it caused them distress and they had their babies too early.
Yeah, I think there could be something in that. Yeah, it's hard to gauge. You know what I mean? I don't keep them any warmer than they would be outside. I don't know how the best way to answer that question would be, really. Just wonder if I think that's possible if you overheat them towards the end. Yeah, there is more stress on the animal at that point. So, look, let's look to give them the ability, if you like, to choose to bask or be cool. If that's probably the only way to answer that question.
So with the I said I was done, but I'm clearly not done. But the conversation we had with Roger, he had made it seem like he was able to take a male blue tongue skink to multiple females in a season. Are you having success like that? Or are you more breeding like one male to one or two females?
Oh, look, you can put a good male over half a dozen females, no problem.
Okay, good to know. I've always limited it to 1 to 2, sometimes 3. I don't want to overdo it, but I think I've been underdoing it.
If it's a good male, mate, they're a good male. You know, good males. You know, give them a day off between matings. You know, like any animal, let them build up the wank tanks, mate.
Yeah, fair enough.
And yeah, but don't be mating them every day. But you could certainly mate a male a dozen times and put him over 6 females. So he's mated each female twice, and you
Yeah.
can have kind of a day off in between each mating. You know, a good male will work for that long.
I remember Ray Gerge years ago would talk about how he would breed his males in the morning and then again in the evening. Is that
That can
something
be.
that?
Yeah, I've done that before, but it just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, burns them out a little too quick, you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think if you've got a male that's hitting the spot, he's much better hitting the spot once with a good solid 24, 36 hours worth of sperm than not. I mean, it's okay make them 2 days in a row, but give them a day off before you go again. You know,
Yeah.
you don't need a day off between every mating, but a couple of days in a row, a day off, a couple of days in a row, a day off. But mate them both ends of the day. I don't see the point in that.
Maybe too much for it.
I think you're starting to overstress the female. And I think then if you're then doing that again the next day with the male, well, then you've mated him 4 times in 2 days. Well, then you're starting to run him thin. Then I would suggest that maybe you would have been better just mating him once on each day and using the full ejaculate rather than splitting it.
I think his argument was he was able to bang twice in his 20s. He thought the lizard should be able to do the same thing.
Yeah, that's right. I think, yeah.
Not everything.
Ray was maybe a little virile in his youth, man.
Lucky him.
Yeah.
What you got, Alex?
What advice do you have for new breeders looking to get into breeding blue tongues, whether Australia or US or?
I just do it because you love it. Don't go doing it because you think you're going to make money out of it. Just do it because you love it. That's it. Yeah. That's the only reason to do it. Full stop. Period. Do it because you love it. Do it because you're sat at home and you can't help but go in and look at your lizards like, wow, look at that. If you're doing that all the time, then it's for you. If you're doing it because you think you're going to make some money out of it and cleaning them out's a chore and all this, then it's not for you.
Well, that's right. I agree with that.
I'll just grab this girl out while we're here. I'm quite pleased with her this year. Where is she? This is a nice, good high orange lava girl. She's pretty gravid. So,
Yeah. Pretty incredible.
yeah.
How
I
long?
know all the pied stuff's here now, but I still don't think you'll ever beat a high orange lava. You know?
Fair.
Do they keep the colors pretty well as they age?
Oh, they vary. She's perhaps maybe dipped off a little bit, but she's still pretty good. The camera probably didn't capture it very well, but she's the one that's on the front. That's the same lizard that's on the front of that book.
Nice.
So yeah, she's a favourite of mine. Yeah, I found that the orange stays, but I've also found on other ones it doesn't. So look, it's. I think all reptiles are a little bit like that. You know, you can have some animals are better as they mature. Some tend to dip off and are nicer babies, but that's reptiles.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Any other viewer questions?
I think that's it. I think I noticed all of them. When you're housing them outdoors, primarily the skinkoides, they're housed separate, right?
Yeah.
I house everything separately. There's only my blotches that I'll put in pairs, and even then, generally, I'll put females together and keep males separate. This guy lives by himself as well. This is a hand puppet Whiteside that the guys at Smart Hurt made for me. So
Pretty cool.
yeah, he blinks his eyes, look, and yeah.
Yeah. It'd have been cooler if you made it yourself, but I'm into it.
Yeah, oh yeah, he's good, but he's my mate. I thought I'd air him today. He went to the last show with me.
That's tight. That looks like fun.
Have you seen the 3D printed blue tongues that they recently?
Yeah, that's Stephen Mallet. If you're unfamiliar with Stephen Mallet, that's Dr. Steve off my original YouTube videos.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
So he's a doctor. He's at veterinary level, but that's his little pastime. He's put together a couple of lava ones of those for me, which we're gonna run a little video of that 3D process on one of my YouTube channel soon.
Cool. I'll check that out.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think, Alex?
Cool.
Oh, go ahead, bud.
Oh yeah. So I've got my new website's coming soon, and that'll have a link on it to my web page and a link to purchase this book and the upcoming book. So anybody wondering, because my website disappeared lately, there's a new one coming. So
cool. And that will be joeballbluetongues.com.
Yes, exactly that.
Well, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Thank you for being patient to get me on, and thank you as always, David. Keep putting up those pictures of yourself on Thanksgiving or whatever you guys do.
America Day is the 4th of July, buddy. That's America Day.
That's actually my wedding anniversary too. So I always enjoy seeing those when you do it.
Yeah, and you know me and you have the same birthday, right?
23rd of August.
23rd of August, sir. 1984 for me.
Yeah. Oh, 1976 for me. I didn't know you shared that birthday with me.
Yeah.
Actually, I did. Yeah, I did.
Yeah. That's right. We're not dating, buddy. You don't have to remember things like that.
Yeah, I don't have to remember. I do remember photos of you in your Speedos, though. So even though we're not dating, I do tend to remember those.
Yeah.
So,
men always do. Females tend to forget it.
Yeah. They do tend to stick in the memory, but I do like to see it. I don't know whether that says a lot about me or you, but I do like to see that kind of thing. So,
hey, I respect that. You know what that means? You're on my mailing list. You're on my after 9, buddy. There's more where that came from.
Yeah, that's good.
You got to do a special one next year for his wedding anniversary.
I'll keep that in mind, buddy. There'll be a little something in there for you.
Yeah, no, I look forward to it. Yeah, cool.
All right. Well, anything you want to plug?
No, that was it. The website's coming soon, like I say. Look out for some new pie combinations this year. Hopefully get a few of those ticked off. Hopefully some of them are worth doing. Yeah, so that's what's to come.
Cool.
Exciting times.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Joe. And anyone looking for blue tongues in the future in Australia, hit Joe up, and you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Alex. Take it easy, mate. Good luck.